I think that out of all the evangelists in the New Testament, Luke is really the master storyteller. He's a great storyteller. But let's first admit that Jesus gave him some great material. When we look at this parable that we just heard in Luke chapter 15, it's helpful to look at it within the context of two other parables that are in that same chapter. The parable of the man who seeks and finds a lost sheep, the parable of the woman who seeks and finds a lost coin, and the parable of the two lost sons and the prodigal father, the gospel passage for the fourth Sunday of Lent that we just heard. So this parable story could really be played out between any parent and child. But Jesus frames the story about a father and a son because in Jesus's day, only males could own and inherit property. Now, the previous parable, the lost coin, demonstrates the plight of women who had no wealth to rely on. And the woman who finds her lost coin rejoices, and she invites her women friends to a party. So in this chapter, Jesus is picturing God as the persistent woman in search of her treasure, as well as the forgiving father longing for his child's return. The poet Dante once characterized the evangelist Luke as, quote, the scribe of the gentleness of God. There may be different variations of that quote, the scribe of the gentleness of God. And the mercy of God is a very common theme in this third gospel. So think of Mary's Magnificat, think of the Good Shepherd, the Good Samaritan, Zacchaeus. But back to today's gospel. You know the story very, very well. The younger son, perhaps bored and restless, asks for his inheritance from his father, and his father hands over 1/3 of his fortune, which was the appropriate inheritance for the younger son. And without any anger or indignation, the father divides the inheritance, and off the son goes. Off the son goes to squander his father's fortune until famine strikes. And subsequently, the younger son indentures himself to a pig farmer, which is a horribly and undignified position to be in as a young Jewish man. Not only has the son lost his fortune in a faraway land, this young man has also lost his very self. He's lost his very self. He comes to his senses. He comes to himself, and that means a return home to his father as a hired hand. So picture the father standing in the doorway every day, looking up the road, waiting, waiting, waiting for the sight of his son. And that one day he catches sight of his son, he races up the road to meet him. We are told the father was filled with compassion. And that is not a word, by the way, that Luke uses casually or often. He was filled with compassion. And before the son can even utter a word of his planned conversation, the father adorns him with all the trappings of inheritance. You know, the ring on the finger, the shoes on the feet. And it's clear that the son has returned. It's clear that the son is indeed the son of this loving father. And so the father calls for a feast, calls for a celebration. And given the entree, the fattened calf, it will take the whole community to consume it. So it's going to be quite a party. But there is a second act, as we know. We might well resonate with the feelings of the second son, because this son too has been alienated, feeling alienated from his father, likely for years. And his rage is expressed in his refusal to enter the house. His rage is expressed in his questioning of the servant and in his father's attempt at comfort. His anger is deflected onto his brother, so he exaggerates the younger brother's sins, imagining him as consorting with prostitutes. His anger, the anger of this older son, is palatable. The tragedy of the older son is not only that he's failed to recognize his place of privilege in the family, but he seems to be oblivious to the fact that his father cares about him as much as he cares about the younger son. So at the end of the parable, the door is literally left open, and Jesus offers no conclusion to the parable. That is left up to us. So we could look at these three parables in this chapter of Luke from a transactional point of view. We say to the shepherd, look, you've got 99 other sheep. Don't worry about the one you've lost. We would say to the woman searching for the coin, look, you've got coins in your pocket. Don't worry about the one you lost. We could say of the young man who had squandered his father's fortune, that kid needs to come home and learn a hard lesson. Let him come home and face the music. But no, none of this is as it is in the reign of God. What's clear to us is Jesus's emphatic message. We should not overlook how Jesus is picturing divine, unconditional, merciful love. The heart of this story is the welcoming embrace of a loving parent, extended to both sons. The parent is really the prodigal one, the one who is reckless and extravagant with their love for both children. Like all the parables, this parable is an invitation. It's a glimpse into the reign of God. And if you wish to see or know how God sees the world, come into the story, suggests Jesus. Come into the story. For this is how the reign of God unfolds in our lives. And when we do enter the story, we find that God's view of the world is remarkably unconventional. And the parable always knocks us off balance a bit. Homecoming is such a powerful word. It's such a rich image. It's such an intense experience. Jesus, the homeless wandering preacher and teacher, relied on the hospitality of others for a place to lay his head at night. But on another level, Jesus invited the lost, the suffering, the oppressed, the forgotten, and the wandering to come home and to find their self, to say yes to a God who is extravagantly loving and generous. The word Lent comes from an old word meaning lengthen, which refers to the lengthening of daylight, the start of spring, and therefore new beginnings, the whole thrust of the spirit of Lent. Lent's always been about reform. So hyphenate that word, reform. It is about being reformed in God's redeeming grace. Lent is about allowing our lives to be reshaped, renewed, re-envisioned. It's got something to do with penance, for sure. But to me, Lent has a lot more to do with growing more fully into that person who is imbued with God's grace and goodness. So in conclusion, Lent may occasion our return to a deeper or contemplative prayer life. Lent could occasion our striving to be kinder, more compassionate, more patient. In these days that we are living in, Lent might challenge us to rediscover our prophetic voice and rekindle our longing for a just world. Or we may simply find ourselves seeking wholeness or healing, or taking on our fears, embracing our brokenness. But Lent is about homecoming, coming home to the I am of God and finding an echo in the I am that we speak to ourselves.